Okay, she's clear. No dinos in the backyard today. All right, thanks for watching my channel. I'm Richie with A-Zone Defense. Please don't forget to click on the subscribe and like button. Now, if you've been watching my series on reloading for beginners, we're at the point where we're actually getting ready to actually do our first reload using the Elite Precision hand loader. Okay, so let me put this down. All right, so we got a bunch of stuff on the table. Now, as you recall, I took everything out of this ammo can. For the most part, everything fits, right? Now, you've got your load data. Like I said before, just photocopy your load data and stick it in your ammo can, right? This load data is going to cover things like your case length and your overall length. It's going to go over your grain of your bullet, as well as your powder and your starting loads and your maximum loads, as well as velocity information. Now, one thing you might want to add to your kit is a bullet puller, because if you mess up, you can recycle, right? So what I mean by that, you can buy one of these bullet pullers, and let's just say you weren't happy with this round because maybe you didn't do the quality control on this, or something just isn't working right for you. You felt uncomfortable with this round, or maybe you had some bad powder and you want to get rid of the powder and keep your bullets. So all you got to do, there's a little collet in there, and you choose the size collet that fit your cartridge. Now, you just stick it in the collet until the head falls in, and that collet will grab. All you got to do is give it a few hard yanks, and the bullet, through inertia, will fall out, right? And you can hear it in here. I've already staged it for you because it takes some use to. Don't want to bang on the kitchen counter. Take this outside, get a block of wood, and bang it, right? I've banged this lots of times, and for some reason, this plastic holds up, and I don't know how they do it, but I whacked the heck out of this, and it hasn't cracked at all. Anyways, pick up one of these as an accessory. It's called a bullet puller. You can find these on Amazon, pretty cheap. Okay, some of the other things you might want to have in your kit or in your range bag is some pliers, needle nose is fine, and some, wipies. Because when you're all done, you want to wipe down your area, wipe down your hands. If you get the lead removal ones, that's even better. Okay, so what you want to do is, you pretty much got everything prepped, right? You've deprimed, or you're going to deprime, and let me show you. Now, the first thing you want to do is safety. Anytime you're dealing with some powder, right, and especially with primers, you're gonna want to have your safety goggles on or your eyewear. Now, let's get started. What I like to do is pretty much take the ammo that I'm using. In this case, it's 4570 Govt, Federals, 300 grain. And just take your caliper, zero it out, and measure what the factory ammo is. This one's giving me a measurement of 2.53 inches. A look here on my load data, it says to use large rifle primer, as well as the overall length of the cartridge should be no more than 2.550. So I'm good to go. Okay? I know this is going to cycle just fine in my lever action. Now, I'm going to pull out my handy dandy classic Elite loader, and I like to keep it in a rubber band just as a tip, because that way the top won't fall off anywhere. Now this gives you load data, right, on the back of this card. Now, why do I have two sets of load data? Because what Lee gives you is a Lee powder dipper. Now, this dipper only works with this load data on the card. So if you cannot find this particular powder, right? Like this one says IMR or benchmark or a H4198 for these different bullet grains. This is not going to work if I happen to know I'm using this particular powder, because I'm going to be using it off this load data here, which is from a reliable source, which is also in Lee's book, okay? Now you can find this load data on the manufacturer's website or the equipment's website, just as long as it's reliable. Just so you know, the Lee Dipper will give you the starting grains based upon the chart in the back if you're using the powder that's provided here. But since I could not find this powder in the store, I knew this powder would work because there's other data. Obviously, this all cannot fit, right, in one little cheat sheet. So they just went with the most common. So you're not going to be able to use this. So we're going to use this a little bit later. Okay, now what you want to do is real simple. I'm going to start off with taking these components out. This is called the priming rod. This is the end you're going to whack it. The end that you don't whack has a little dimple. I'm just going to, just cover real briefly all these little things are. Now here is your decapper or pin. And what happens here is when you have your spent casing with the primer that's in there, you're gonna take this and you're gonna whack, and that primer will fall out. All right. And this is when your jeweler rubber's mallet comes in handy. Now this here is called a decapping chamber, right? You're gonna use both sides. This little kit serves multi-purpose. Now this right here is actually your bullet seater, right? Right there. And the top part is actually your, what they call your priming chamber. And look right there, that's where your primer is gonna sit. And it's actually spring loaded. See how that moves? It's spring loaded. Now this is what they call your, pretty much your die. It has your stop collar on the top part. The bottom portion is your body and sizing die, and this is your lock nut. Now, a reason why you're going to start off with your factory ammo is because you need to adjust this on this first use. And pretty much how you adjust it is you're going to take the factory cartridge and you're going to stick it in, right? Now you're going to take your decapping chamber and just put it together so that it's flush. You turn this over, and the next step is to take your bullet seater and you're just going to push this down and you're going to start adjusting. You want to adjust to where there's just a slight opening there. When I mean adjust, you're just going to adjust this and move this down until you actually fill the top of that bullet from the factory round, right? You don't have to hammer that kind of stuff. You're just filling it, right? Then once you fill it, then you start adjusting. And this is basically giving you the length, right, when you're making your cartridge. Okay, let me put this aside for now, and let's get started. I'm going to actually pour this powder so you can see in this bowl. You can dip it out of the can. I just want to point out that powder looks very different from powder to powder in different manufacturers and different types. Pistol, rifle, they can be flat, they could be like pin shape, pencil shavings, flakes, diamond crystals, all kinds of stuff, right? So that's why it's important. Some powders burn faster, some burn slower because there's more surface, develop more pressures, give you more velocity, less velocity, and so forth. So just be careful on that. Now here is a tip, right? Take your dryer, right? This is pretty much a fabric dryer sheet. And you're going, remember I said about getting rid of any static? Because this powder will tend to cling on things, including metal and plastic. So you just want to, take your dryer sheet and put this in there so that there's no static in that. So when you're ready to dip your powder, all the powder comes out and doesn't cling to the inside. You want to do that. This is a tip, right? You want to do that with your die. Your die just goes straight through. So you can just start feeding it in there, right? And then you can take your rod and just start feeding it in there until it comes out the other end, right? Just like so. Because when you get ready to pour the powder through this, it's going to cling and stick through the edges, and this helps prevent that, right? And just do that to everything that you might spill powder on, right? And anything plastic, you definitely want to, wipe down for anti-static. Now this is my powder flask that I'll take to the range in this box. I typically don't take my containers. So in here, I will fill my powder and I will use this, right? Just like so. So let's get started. Now, I mentioned before that it's also good to have some case lube, right? You can take this off and put some in your hands, wipe it around. However, I just like to use this this case pad and just have the lube on this spongy sheet, and it's going to lube a little bit on the outside. You don't need a whole lot, but this just helps for these not to get stuck. I also mentioned that I like to also use this, right, as a tool to flare out the mouth of the case, right? So this is a deburring tool. I use it also to flare out the mouth. You don't have to do a whole lot. Don't jam it in there. You just want a little bit of flare, and it cleans it up, a little bit, and that's all you need to do, right? You've already used the pocket primer cleaners, right, to clean out the bottom of where your spent primers was. Remember, we took this and we hit the primer out. So now what you want to do is basically get starting to reload. Now, what you want to do is basically on your die, you're going to want to use the opening that goes all the way through versus a neck. If you look in here, there's a neck, right? And that helps crimp. The other side is open to where it's just more of a straight wall. So you're going to take your case and it's just going to go like so. You're going to take your hammer or your rubber jeweler's mallet, and you're going to make this head of this cartridge go flush. So let me show you what that looks like. And that looks pretty flush to me, okay? Now you're going to be ready to prime. So I'm going to take one of my large rifle primers and I'm going to set it on my priming chamber. And just make sure the primer is positioned properly so that the opening of the primer goes to the corresponding opening on the head. You're basically it's gonna fit right there, and it's gonna line up. Now the next thing you need to do is basically take your hammer and your priming rod. Now the priming rod just goes right in, and you just hold it and you just start whacking until you feel that primer seat. So that primer is now seated. You want to rub your finger over it to make sure that it's seated properly. You don't want it to protrude. Then all you want to do is just gently tap to loosen it up. And this is how I do my litmus test, is I take the casing with the primer and I lay it on a flat surface and make sure that it does not wobble. That one did not move, it did not wobble. I'll show you a test one that wobbles. You see that wobble? That primer was not seated all the way where it should be. Even though I felt it with my finger, it feels pretty good. This is my litmus test here. Okay, so that's another tip. And that's why it's also important to mark things. And if you want to start over, then this is when your handy dandy bullet puller comes in handy and you can redo this cartridge. Okay, so I'm basically going to put this back in, right? And I'm going to set it on my decamping chamber with the open part, right? And now I'm ready for my powder. Now, I'm going to be using a digital scale. I want to make sure that my scale is correct. And I'm going to make sure that it's going to be on grain, not milliliters, not ounces, not grams. It needs to say grain, okay? And it shows 00, okay? When I pick it up, it's not going to show, right? Because I'm moving things around. Now, this particular scale has some quality control. These are little 20 gram weights. And I can put this on here and tear it out. Okay, but you need to tear the weight on your little, tray, a little holder here. And this is at 34.9 grains, roughly 35 grains is what this weighs. So I'm going to clear that by pressing the T for tear. And now I'm going to double check that. And it's going to go to minus 34.9 or 35 grains. I put it back on there and it zeroes out. All right. Now this is when I go to my load data. And for this particular powder, it says starting load is 61 grains, with the maximum load being 68 grains, okay? And you're double checking, making sure you're using the right chart for your firearm. So I'm going to take my dipper here, and basically you don't want to, use too much force. You pretty much just want to back it in just like that. You don't want to compress the grain. And you just do it like so. Right now it's reading 41.7 grains. And here's a good example of the powder sticking to the outside. This is what I meant. So I probably needed to do a better job with using the dryer sheet. So I don't want to spill this all over my counter. So now I'm at 59.4 grains. And now I'm at 61.9. So I'm going to stop there. That is my starting load. My starting load says 61. I'm at 61.9, almost 62 grains, but I'm well within the measurements, right? Because as long as they don't go above 68. So I'm going to take my grains and very carefully, I like to pick up my die, look down the mouth of my casing and just pour the grains just like this. Now you could use another funnel if you want. Just make sure you pour nice and slow so that everything doesn't spill on the sides and get everywhere, right? Make sure no one is smoking around you. And that's all I do. I put this back on the table. Take my priming rod. Just tap it, kind of levels out anything in there, any grains or powder just falls right in. Now I'm ready for my bullet. All right, got my bullet. When you get bullets, first thing you want to do is measure it, right? You want to make sure this actually weighs 300 grains. You want to make sure that the measurements, right, on the caliper gives you the right diameter for the caliber. Last thing you want is just putting a bullet in there that you assume because you ordered it with the right grain came to you correct. You're just going to drop this in. Then you're going to use the bullet cedar portion. Stick this in right on top. You're going to feel it sit on top of that bullet. Now you notice there's space when before there wasn't. So that's how much seating has to go. Remember when we adjusted it. And you're just going to give it some nice even taps. Until that bullet goes to where the adjustment is. Right, and you just check to make sure it's gonna looks good to you, and that looks good to me. Now make sure you're using this correctly, because if you don't, this primer is going to get exposed, and you don't want to whack on a hard surface on that. So now you're ready to crimp. So now you can just turn your die over, and it's going to crimp that bullet in place. And then you just give it some wax. Take a look at it. And if you feel like it's pretty good, then it's pretty good. All right? That looks pretty good to me. That bullet's been seated and crimped. Come back to your quality control. Measure the overall length of that bullet. I'm at 2.497, so I'm below the 2.550. So damn good job. With the Lee Classic hand loader, this bullet is ready to go in its tray, and I'm done. Voila. Now, I did this in a very slow fashion explaining this, but you can see you can probably knock these things out. You can do a box of bullets, you know, probably within 20 minutes if you if you just really took your time and did everything right. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. This is how you reload using the Lee Classic hand loader. Very simple to do. Nothing scary about it. Anyways, enjoy. Thanks for watching.